That should be recording now. It is, absolutely. So welcome to everyone who's joining us today. This is Unit 2 of the Pre-Service and Financial Care. We're going to get through the first 3 chapters, so to speak, and then the remaining 4 will be done next week as well. As a reminder, please ensure that you sign on to your e-learning within HFMA, and please review these 3 modules before next week's call, or again right after that. All right, this is a supplement to taking the CRCR. It is not going to replace your taking that. So it really is just to give you an idea of some of the material, some of the sample questions, and then certainly supplement the materials to take the exam. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We're going to ask that you stay on mute and off camera since we are recording this, but put the questions in the chat and I will get to them as quickly as I can. At the end, we should have some time to do that. So today we're going to talk about the different types of scheduled and unscheduled patients within an acute care healthcare facility. And then we're going to talk about non-acute patient types. So a patient's first contact with a healthcare facility is either as a scheduled or unscheduled patient, depending on whether immediate care is needed or if the services can be scheduled for a future date or time. Many patients receive healthcare services that are not scheduled ahead of time, including urgent, direct admits, walk-ins for routine labs and x-rays, and newborns. There are several health services available to patients which are not normally provided in an acute care hospital setting. These include skilled nursing, hospice care, home health services, clinic services, and durable medical equipment. Patients are considered scheduled if the healthcare facility knows that the patient is coming ahead of time. Healthcare facilities normally schedule services that are high dollar and require significant pre-processing to ensure appropriate reimbursement and or significant resource coordination. Scheduled patients can be registered as inpatients, outpatients, or recurring series patient types. Typical recurring are therapies, behavioral health, chemotherapy, and radiation therapy. Patients are scheduled as inpatient if their level of care meets inpatient acuity criteria. Most facilities use Medicare standards as the guideline for determining inpatient care. Major surgery patients and obstetrical patients are the most commonly scheduled inpatients. Direct admit patients can be considered scheduled if the physician calls the facility ahead of time to let them know the patient is coming. Patients are scheduled as outpatient if the service they receive do not involve an overnight stay. Patients arrive for service, receive treatment and or testing, and go home. Examples are routine diagnostic testing, pulmonary function testing, interventional radiology, ambulatory surgery, and labs. Certain services where the treatment is ongoing are registered as recurring or series patients, which are considered outpatient. Once registration is completed and charges related to the ongoing treatment are entered on one account for multiple days of service. They can typically be re-registered on a monthly basis if the treatment duration exceeds 30 days. Again, examples of therapies, behavioral health, IV therapy, chemotherapy, radiation therapy. The emergency department is the most common source of unscheduled admissions. Patients arrive in the ED seeking care, and if the patient meets the acuity criteria for admission, an order is written to admit the patient. When the patient is admitted, the admission will be considered an emergency admission. Most health plans require a notification of emergency admissions within a specific time period, usually within 24 hours or the next business day. Failure to do so may result in denied days. Certain types of services, such as routine x-rays and laboratory tests, are typically provided without the benefit of prior scheduling. They are considered walk-ins. Typically, these services do not require any approval from the health plan, but may require the patient to receive services at a contracted or an in-network facility. Observation is used to evaluate patients for possible inpatient admissions, to resolve a medical problem so that the patient may be discharged, for treatment that is expected to last less than 24 hours, or to treat complications following outpatient surgery or procedures. Remember the Medicare's 2 midnight rule as it relates to observation patients. Apologies, I got to get this to move. Okay. Non-acute patient types. Patients are admitted into skilled nursing units or facilities when they no longer meet the criteria for acute care, but still need an inpatient level of skilled nursing care or rehabilitation services. These usually include orthopedic, surgical patients who require intense physical therapy, and stroke patients who require comprehensive rehab services. Typically, Medicare will only cover services in a skilled nursing facility if the patient was transferred after at least a 3-day inpatient stay for a related illness or injury. We know that with the pandemic, some of these restrictions were removed to facilitate care. However, the regulation has not been permanently changed. Hospice care is intended to provide humane and compassionate care for patients who are in the last stages of an incurable disease and have a life expectancy of 6 months or less. Hospice services support the patient with pain relief and symptom management, but the disease is no longer treated. If a hospice patient receiving services under the Medicare program is admitted to the hospital for hospice-related services, the hospice program is billed, not Medicare. Home health services can cover a wide range of healthcare services which can be given in a home for illness or injury, such as physical therapy or speech pathology. Medical equipment is deemed DME if it's intended to be used over and over again. Examples include wheelchairs, hospital beds, and oxygen tanks. And then finally, a clinic is a facility or part of one that is devoted to the diagnosis and treatment of outpatients. Patients are considered scheduled if the healthcare facility knows that the patient is coming ahead of time. Again, scheduled patients can be registered as inpatients, outpatients, or recurring series types. Many patients receive healthcare services that are not scheduled ahead of time. These patient types include unscheduled inpatients or urgent patients, unscheduled outpatients or walk-ins, emergency patients, observation patients, and newborns. Non-acute health services include skilled nursing, hospice care, home health services, clinic services, and durable medical equipment. Hopefully, we've given you some idea of the various types of patients and the importance of scheduling patients to ensure appropriate resources are secured. So these are the key points you should be coming away with when you go through the e-learning section on the HFMA website. So sample questions, unfortunately, we can't support polling questions at this point in time, but our sample question that you might see on the exam would be, which patients are considered scheduled? Is it recurring series, hospice care, observation patients, or emergency department patients? So think about the material that we just went through. Okay, and the correct answer is number 1. Patients who receive services where the treatment is ongoing are registered as recurring or series patients and are categorized as scheduled. Okay. How many days must a patient be inpatient for Medicare to pay for a SNF stay? Is it 2 days? And taking out of consideration the pandemic modifications that may have been made per regulations, how many days must a patient be inpatient for Medicare? Is it 2? Is it 5? Is it 3? Or is it 10? And the correct answer is 3. Inpatient, they must be inpatient for a minimum of 3 days for Medicare to pay for a sniff. So in this section, we're going to address scheduling processes, which include patient identification, the requested services, medical necessities screening, and the Medicare Advanced Beneficiary Notice, or the ABN. So scheduling key concepts. Scheduling patients for services allows the facility to prepare for the patient's services by reserving time and obtaining information, equipment, and resources required to provide the service. It also allows the facility the time to review the appropriateness of the service, screen for managed care requirements, and resolve any financial issues prior to service. Completed daily schedules are used by the service department and the arrival area if the patient does not go directly to the department to complete final preparations for the patient's arrival. Each component of the scheduling process will be discussed in some detail in the CRCR study materials, as these activities form the basis for pre-service registration and financial processing. Right, so core things that we have to do as part of our scheduling process. I must have patient identification. Did I choose the right patient? What is the requested service? What is the requested service type? We're going to talk about scheduling instructions, making sure patients understand the services that they're going to have and what they need to do prior. Review and validation. Patient reminders and arrival instructions. Where do I need to go to service? Do I have to go to registration? Do I go directly to the core department? And then any order requirements that we need to review. So the first most important thing that we must do in scheduling a patient is identifying the patient. Did I get it right? Health information systems maintain historical databases for every patient who has had services within the healthcare system. Critical patient information, including the patient's full legal name, date of birth, sex, and social security number, is collected and used as a patient identifier. Each patient is assigned a unique number, commonly called the patient master patient index number, or the MPI, or the enterprise MPI, EMPI, or corporate patient index number, or CPI. Individual episodes of care are linked to the MPI or the CPI number to enable the provider to identify all services provided to an individual patient within the healthcare system. When there is a request for service, the scheduling staff member must confirm the patient's unique identification record to ensure that he or she accesses the correct information in the historical database. Obtaining and confirming accurate patient information is extremely important in order to avoid data errors such as duplicate medical record numbers or choosing the wrong patient, which could have serious consequences. A physician order is generated and becomes the basis for the request for service. The contact for the request for service can come from the patient, the physician's office, or a service department in the healthcare facility. The patient is scheduling the service. He or she is given a written physical physician order, or the physician office faxes the written order to the scheduling department and is asked to call and schedule the service when it is convenient for the patient. Patients usually schedule services such as ultrasounds, mammograms, stress tests, and therapies. The physician office typically schedules surgery cases, catheterizations, and other invasive type procedures. The type of requested service will determine the scheduling instructions. Instructions to the schedulers range from the basics, such as the amount of time needed for the test, to the complex, when rooms, equipment, and personnel must be coordinated to provide the needed service. Many healthcare organizations use automated scheduling systems and build the scheduling systems in the system. The scheduling system prompts the scheduler to complete required scheduling instructions each time a test or procedure is requested. One example of scheduling instructions would be, I'm coming in for a nuclear medicine procedure. My instructions would be to contact the department to order the isotope, reserve the procedure room for Y minutes or X minutes, inform the department if the patient is in a wheelchair, and provide medication instructions based on the type of test ordered. We all know, commonly the diagnostic colonoscopy that then has prep tests and things like that. So we're all familiar with that one, or most of us are. Scheduled procedures routinely include patient preparation instructions that must be completed prior to the test procedure. By providing accurate instructions during the scheduling process, the scheduler ensures that the patient will be properly prepared for the service. Examples of commonly used patient instructions include refrain from eating or drinking anything after midnight, take all prescription medications on the day of the test, and at least 90 minutes prior to the exam, drink 24 ounces or water. Before finalizing the scheduling contact, all components of the scheduling contact are reviewed and validated. This important step is used to verify that the patient has complete and accurate identification. The following information should be reviewed as part of a scheduled finalization: the service to be provided, date and location, arrival time and procedure time, required pre-service, including completion time frame, patient prep instructions, patient arrival instructions, such as where to park, where to report, how to get to the service area. So wayfinding. The patient reminder is a written list of the patient's responsibilities and usually includes the same items summarized at the end of the scheduling call, along with any additional instructions provided as part of additional access processing activities. Example, required insurance forms, expected time of service co-payments. Reminder letters can also include maps that show the patient where to park, where to report when he or she arrives, and where the service department is located. These notices may be used to reduce the incidence of no-shows or non-compliance with testing instructions. In addition, many facilities call the patient a day or two prior to the scheduled visit to remind him or her of the appointment. Again, before finalizing the scheduling context, again, all components of the scheduling context are reviewed and validated. And this just gives you a reframe of what we would go through. Again, what you want to do as part of a verbal, and what you want to do as part of a written. Again, the patient responsibilities, again, what is the detail that they need to do? Again, we're trying to avoid no-shows or non-compliance. So tests and orders can only be provided with a valid physician order. The few exceptions are requests from Medicare beneficiaries for flu vaccines, pneumonia vaccines, or screening mammography. Initially, verbal orders can be taken as long as they are accepted by qualified staff as defined in a facility's medical staff bylaws, rules, and regulations. So it may be a nurse or an NP or a PA. Certainly a clerk probably cannot take orders. All verbal orders must ultimately be authenticated by the ordering physician by subsequent written signatures, fax signatures, or computer signature. Medicare requires the following data elements to consider a physician order valid: patient full legal name, date order written, test or service ordered, diagnosis, coded diagnosis, or narrative description of the reason, name of the ordering physician or allied health professional, and signature of the physician or AHP ordering the test or services. Orders may be written on a prescription pad, documented on a pre-printed form, electronically generated, and transmitted by the practice management system. They must include the physician address and telephone number, MPI number, patient date of birth, patient sex, patient social security number, patient demographic. This is the information that's currently out in the CRC training. I think we probably have some leeway or changes in whether or not social security number is required any longer. Certainly we know that social security has probably been pulled out of a lot of documentation and requirements. So we'll check with HFMA on any updates on that. Medical necessity and ABN. Medicare will only pay for tests and services that it determines are reasonable and necessary. Medicare has established guidelines called local coverage decisions, or LCDs, and national coverage determinations, or NCDs, that establish which diagnosis, signs, or symptoms are payable. If a test is ordered where an LCD or NCD exists, there must be documentation of medical necessity in order for Medicare to pay for the test or service. If a test or service is not medically necessary, according to the LCD/NCD, a signed advance beneficiary notice, or ABN, must be obtained from the patient. Now, most providers will try to go back to the doctor and ordered it to see if they failed to provide them with all the diagnosis codes. And many times that's the case. But if that's or only the diagnosis codes, patients must be informed about that. Now, ABNs are not used for inpatient services or for tests that are always excluded from Medicare payment, such as acupuncture, experimental tests, and research testing. Medicare provides other forms for these situations. The purpose of the ABN is to give the patient advance notice that Medicare may not pay for the test or services ordered and the associated costs, and they will be billed to the patient. The ABN must be issued to the patient before providing services related to the ABN. Generic, routine, and blanket ABNs are not acceptable in cases such as frequency limitations where all patients are at risk. Again, if you do not obtain an ABN and put the appropriate modifiers on your claims, you may not bill your patient. Again, an ABN is not used for inpatient services. The inpatient counterpart to the ABN is the HINN and should be provided to beneficiaries prior to admission, at admission, or at any point during an inpatient stay if the hospital determines that the care the beneficiary is receiving or is about to receive is not covered. I'll give you a good example that I truly dealt with. Grandma was in the hospital and her family was notified on Friday that the physician put in the orders for her to be discharged that day. When the family was contacted, they informed us that they were going away for the weekend and no one would be available to pick up Mom until Tuesday. Clearly, that is an example of the remaining stay being custodial in nature. But yeah, I mean, it's not a good way to treat Grandma, right? So that would require a notice of non-coverage. So key points to take away with as you go through this section is Medicare has established guidelines called LCDs and NCDs that are used to determine which diagnoses, signs, and symptoms are payable. Tests and services can only be provided with a valid physician order. Another point to keep in mind is key patient information, including the patient's full legal name, date of birth, sex, and social security number should be collected and used as patient identifiers to avoid duplicate medical record numbers and erroneously choosing the wrong patient. Okay. So, sample question. Name the guideline that Medicare established to determine which signs or symptoms are payable. The advance beneficiary notice, local coverage determination, patient identifiers, or scheduling instructions. So hopefully we went through this enough that you got the answer right. The correct answer is number 2. Medicare and other health plans might have notice of non-coverage. You cannot use an ABN for commercial payers. You can give them a notice of non-coverage. The difference with commercials is that if you get a denial for medical necessity, you may bill your patient. If you get a denial for not medically necessary for Medicare and you did not give them an ABN, you cannot bill them. Okay. All right, final topic that we'll get into and hopefully I'll answer any questions you might have is pre-registration. In this section, we're going to talk about pre-registration purpose and the process. We're going to talk about the information collected during pre-registration, consequences that an organization may experience due to inaccurate or incorrect patient information, and an overview of the Medicare secondary payer screening process, or the MSP. Pre-registration should be completed for all scheduled patients prior to their arrival for service. Obtaining the patient's demographic and insurance information prior to service is one of the key steps to ensure accurate and timely filing. A best performance indicator is that 98% of all scheduled patients should be pre-registered. Successful pre-registration programs also identifies the potential need for financial assistance and provides staff with the opportunity to give patients preparation instructions. The process of pre-registration ensures that patient access staff will have complete and valid information needed to finalize any remaining pre-access activities, including Medicare secondary payer screening, medical necessity screening, insurance verification, pre-certification authorization, managed care requirement resolutions, and financial education resolution. I believe the most important benefits is that patients have taken care of their financial issues and concern and can now focus on their test or treatment only during their visit, not their financial obligations. The purpose of the initial pre-registration step is to identify if the patient has been a previous patient and has an existing master patient index, or MPI number. Each patient with an historical record in the facility's registration is assigned a unique MPI number, and all patient information is documented using this number. A search for the patient's MPI is initiated using the patient's full legal name and date of birth, or the patient's Social Security number if available. Many patients have similar names, and the only way to make sure the correct patient record is accessed is to validate using multiple identifiers. If the patient's record cannot be found with the information providers, always ask the patient if he or she has had previous services at the facility, or if his or her record could be listed under a different spelling, or example, maiden name or a nickname. The first critical step, again, is verifying that patient's information. Express check-in should be established for scheduled and pre-registered patients either in a designated area or going directly to the service department. Because pre-service activity processing has been completed, the only remaining registration steps include confirming patient identification, activating the record, if we're still placing armbands for patients during the provision of services, obtaining signatures, and finalizing any financial resolution obligations. For patients with no MPI number, a new medical record will be generated. Again, required information, patient's full legal name. One of my facilities is on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, used to register patients with Bubba. Right? If that's not his full legal name, and there literally was one man whose full legal name was Bubba, then you have to make sure it's the legal name. If she goes by Betty, but her name is Elizabeth, has to be Elizabeth. Minimum requirements, sex, also known as gender, date of birth, additional information, including race, ethnicity, social security number. Again, many of those are things that are going to be more not required, but are obtained for other reasons. Serious consequences may occur if patients are identified incorrectly via the generation of a duplicate medical record or by the selection of the wrong patient record. Treating a patient with the wrong medical history, a patient can have serious adverse reactions to treatment since their allergies and medical conditions are not correctly identified. If insurance information is wrong, then a patient claim is sent to the wrong health plan. Explanation of benefit statements are then sent to the wrong patient, thus resulting in a serious breach of confidentiality and is considered erroneous billing. And incorrect medical services are added to the wrong patient's medical record, again, potentially perpetuating adverse medical outcomes. So very key to getting paid is insurance verification. Once the registration process is completed, insurance verification is conducted to ensure the accuracy of the insurance information. Coverage issues are identified and communicated to the patient. This sets the stage for completion of financial education and account resolution based on deductibles, co-insurance, or other coverage limitations. Insurance verification can be completed through electronic inquiry or telephone contact. Most major health insurance payers, including Medicare and Medicaid, offer electronic verification via the ANSI 270-271 transaction set. Electronic inquiry provides the fastest and most cost-effective and efficient way to complete insurance verification and should be used whenever available. Electronic verification may be automated through the registration system or initiated manually via the payer's website. Sequencing plans involved in a coordination of benefit or COB situation, so the primary, secondary, and tertiary plans are correctly recorded and billed. Recording patient out-of-pocket liabilities such as deductibles, co-payments, co-insurance, and coverage limitations allows for a more accurate estimate of the amount the patient may owe. Identifying pre-authorization and pre-certification requirements should be based on the patient's plan. The prefix, the service, and location are key to ensure you avoid back-end denials that have a limited capability to overturn. With respect to pre-auth and pre-certification, the downside is that most payers are not putting it in detail in the ANSI 270, 271s. Technology is typically used to validate that, or it's done manually. The other issue with the 270, 271, it cannot be done other than Medicare, same and similar in limitations. It can not be done at a CPT code level. So if you want to know if a certain CPT code will be covered or if a certain CPT code requires pre-authorization, you cannot get that through the ANSI 270, 271 transaction set. For Medicare patients, an important component of the pre-registration process is the effective completion of the Medicare secondary payer or MSP screening process. Medicare does not want to pay as primary if there's another payer that should be primary. The basic MSP rules are discussed in course 1.6, Medicare and Compliance Regulations, which we went over the last sessions. For patient access staff, understanding both the MSP rules and how to ask the MSP questions are essentials, and Medicare will audit that you're doing this on a yearly basis. Many facilities have developed computerized MSP forms that guide staff through the required questions. So this is another topic that has been repeated in a few sessions. So understanding MSP rules would be important. Anyone that has worked in a patient access will tell you that patients don't really understand this, and particularly our Medicare population. My dad was always giving his Medicare card and failed to inform them that my mother had an employer group health plan that was primary. So the rules, if a patient or spouse is working over the age of 65 and has chosen to take the group health plan, they don't have to, but they cannot be offered as a supplemental. And the employer has more than 20 employees, then the employer group health plan is primary. Again, they can choose not to get it, but they've lost any coverage under those circumstances. If a patient is under the age of 65, has Medicare through disability, and has an employer group health plan where their employer has more than 100 employees, then the employer group health plan is primary over Medicare. If a patient has Medicare through end-stage renal disease, or ESRD, and has a group health plan, then the employer group health plan is primary during the 30-month coordination period. Once they have met the 30-month coordination period, Medicare then becomes the primary payer. And then finally, if a patient has liability coverage due to either an accident, auto accident, or workers' compensation premise accident, then the liability coverage must be billed first. If a patient has an accident in their own home, then liability would not apply and Medicare remains the primary. So as you can see, The rules are very complex, which is why we're making sure that we understand this, and this will be something that I would believe will come up on the CRCR as a topic in some way, shape, or form. So what if you do an incomplete pre-registration or registration, right? We've got some impacts to that, right? Return mail, right? I can't collect money from the patient. Missing invalid subscriber information. Patient isn't eligible to date of service. So I'm getting these denials for authorization that I can't overturn. The patient is out of network status, and we didn't inform them of that. So based on the No Surprise Billing Act, I now can't bill them outside of the allowed amount. Medical necessity failure, and then things like coverage limitations. So the importance of a complete, accurate financial clearance process, including pre-registration, is very impactful to the bottom line of a provider. You got to get it right. Yeah, because the average cost to rebill a claim, if you can, as we mentioned, prior authorizations, can't overturn those, is $50 per claim. When the claim is reworked, analyzing the denial, requesting additional information, reviewing notes and documentation, appealing the denial, preparing and sending the denial, the amount earned is dramatically reduced, impacting the provider line. So we have to get away from a concept and culture of denial management. We got to move to that denial prevention culture and strategy. So key points that you want to come away with: the importance of pre-registration. What happens if I don't get that pre-registered down? What is the impact to the provider, the important stuff? And that's why our staff that work patient access have a very critical role in our organizations, and they must be given the tools and the training to be able to properly collect and deal with that the financial clearance process, so we get paid for what we do. All right. So another sample question: what is the purpose of insurance verification? Okay. To effectively complete the MSP screening process, to complete guarantor information if the guarantor is not the patient, to identify information that does not have to be collected from the patient, and to ensure accuracy of the health plan information. Okay. So the insurance verification is related to ensure we've got the correct insurance plan, to have that set the stage for completion of financial education and account resolution based on deductible, co-insurance, or other coverage limitations. So that's why it's key that eligibility is done at time of scheduling, prior to the services being rendered, at the time the services are being rendered. Each month that you have a recurring patient. So usually eligibility is not done one and done. It's done many times throughout the life cycle of that account, and it should be to avoid any back-end denials. When is Medicare not the secondary payer? When the patient is working and has insurance through their employer with more than 20 employees, patient has an accident in their own home, patient is on disability and is over 65, patient is ESRD and is after the 30-month coordination period, right? So the reason I put this question is because reading the question and how it's phrased is going to be very critical when you take that CRCR, right? If you read it or interpret it in one way, you may answer it one way. And if you, again, it's very just key to it, because the answer to this is number 2. Patient has an accident in their own home. They're not covered under liability, and Medicare would be the primary payer. So the key concept there is when is Medicare not the secondary payer? All the other scenarios is when Medicare is, okay? So I'm going to open it up to questions. Feel free to either join in and put it in a chat. Let me see if I have any chat questions out there. Or feel free to come off of mute. And if not, as we wait to see if I get any questions, again, reminder, sign into your HFMA e-learning, sign up to take the CRCR. If it says your course is expired, you will need to reach out to National HFMA, and they can get that re-upped for you so you can take the exam. These sessions are only supplemental, so you really do have to take that and make sure you're prepared. The sample questions are that, just samples. So again, these recordings and prior recordings are available on the Florida HFMA YouTube channel, so you can sign in and re-listen again if you want to prior to just taking the exam. And all of the materials are on the HFMA website. They would have been posted back in the fall of 2021. Material has not changed. So if you want to download those and take notes on while you're doing the sessions, that's also an option as well. So not hearing anybody coming off mute or putting any questions in the chat. So with that, I will take it that we don't have any questions. I thank you for your time today. Hopefully you're finding this valuable. If you know any colleagues and friends that you know are looking to take CRCR, then please share with them. Again, they could join anytime. They don't have to start from the beginning. They can catch up on materials by taking the webinars and the recording. So feel free to share with your colleagues and your team members and your friends that are looking to get certified as well. And with that, I hope you all have a good rest of your day. And hopefully we'll see many of you next week. Take care.